Haboriako! 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 Haboriako!
Good morning, Kenya, or is it good evening, depending on what time you got so bored with the life that you decided to watch this show. Karibu sana. On today's episode, a loan that disappeared faster than your salary, especially in January, a president who has ruled longer than Wi-Fi and Bluetooth device has been in existence, and how a 20-year-old streamer made the whole country sprint like a marathon. My name is Willis Raburu, and this is Hold My Mic, Drop the Beat.
Hold my mic. Hold my mic. Hold my mic. Yeah, yo, hold my mic. Hey, hold my mic. Hold my mic. Hey, hold my mic. Hold my mic.
All right, folks, let's start in Uganda, where elections come with a few surprises, which in East Africa means everyone is confused, but nobody is shocked, and somehow it's all very familiar. So this past Thursday, January the 15th of 2026, Uganda went to the polls in what might be the longest-running political reality show in Africa. No, I'm not talking about Big Brother Africa or the Real Housewives of Kawangware. I'm talking about elections in a country where one man has been president since 1986. That is about 40 years now, longer than some Ugandans have been alive, finished school, started thinking about retirement, and all of that.
Naffe, Your Excellence, tulaga wano wajjo tujje okutuusa wano wotutuusizza olwaleero.
President Yoweri Museveni has ruled Uganda since before Bluetooth was a thing, before it was connected in the device, and before Kenyan MPs even discovered CDF. He is 81 years old and is health seeking what would be his 7th term in office. You know, like his name, Mu7E. See what I did there? Let's set the scene for you properly, okay? One country, one president who has served for so long, he's practically a national monument by now. And one musician who decided that a microphone in the studio wasn't loud enough, so he took the microphone out to the streets. I'm talking about Bobi Wine. From ghetto anthems to a big government headache, the man went from singing in bars to shouting at power. It is a career switch that in Uganda ranks just slightly below treason. Kidogo tu hapo chini. But here is where things get a little interesting and perhaps even ridiculous. So Uganda's Communication Commission announced a temporary nationwide internet shutdown just 48 hours before the election. And where was this bold announcement made? You guessed it right, on the internet. That's right, mobile, broadband, fiber, satellite, everything went off. Why, you ask? Why? Because the government said it was to stop misinformation, incitement, and electoral fraud, also known as the truth, which sounds suspiciously like removing the fire alarm and then claiming you prevented fires. Naturally, Bobi Wine did not take this lying down. He posted, well, he would have posted, but the internet was off. So instead, he just yelled loudly, and very loudly in real life. Luckily, Lani Modo was there to cover. After casting his vote in Kampala with his wife by his side on Thursday, he said voting was being done in the dark.
Internet has been switched off across the country. This is done in order to facilitate the intended rigging of the regime.
Now, Bobi Wine said that the shutdown wasn't about security. It was about facilitating rigging. And with the biometric machines malfunctioning and polling stations opening hours late, one might begin to wonder whether the phrase technical challenge is part of Ugandan standard election vocabulary. Now, let's talk about the security presence. Before voters even got near a ballot box, soldiers and police were already there, like uninvited relatives who show up for the wedding day and they stay for the honeymoon because tunataka uzae sahi. Some reports even said Bobi Wine's own home was surrounded by military forces in the lead up to election day. You know it's serious when your home suddenly has a security budget. But well, Bobi Wine has been through this before. In the 2021 election, his first run against Museveni, he accused the government of fraud, ballot stuffing, and subjecting him to a very politically convenient house arrest. This time round, he warned the government that rigging would be met with protest. He basically told his supporters that if you see something, make noise.
Tell them to make noise.
Anyway, like almost everyone had predicted, Museveni won that election. By the time you're seeing this, he's probably been announced or something of the sort, which means he has now outlasted Wi-Fi, BlackBerry, and TikTok. 40 years is long enough to invent a technology, make it obsolete, and even invent a new one. Meanwhile, every Ugandan over the age of 40 has only ever known one president their entire life. That's not a democracy at this point. That is a civic subscription without an expiry date. And get this, he had promised not to do this, but clearly he is a politician.
Aujourd'hui aussi, c'est un autre jour.
Now, if you thought that Ugandan politics was hot and Kenyan politics was slowing down, well...
In fact, it might get hotter. Jikoni itakuwa hot. If you don't want to cook, get out of the kitchen.
Now, if you thought that Kenyan politics was chaotic, just wait until you see what's happening inside one of our main opposition parties. That is the Orange Democratic Movement. Now, one day we look at the word democratic, but anyway, once the most organized political party in the country, it is now serving drama hotter than a Rashid Abdallah and Lulu Hassan soap opera.
Wangapi wamekubali tuendelee kuimarisha chama yetu ya ODM? Wangapi wamekubali wainue mkono? Mbona watu wa nyuma huko hawainui mkono?
It all started with Raila Odinga's passing last year, which left a giant leadership question mark hanging above ODM like a disappointed ant's eyebrow. Now, since then, the party has been trying to decide who leads the ownership now that Baba is gone. Enter the first act of our political telenovela, Oburu Oginga, recently confirmed as party leader, standing before the ODM faithful and declaring with all the calm of a man walking on eggshells.
Na sisi lazima tuendelee pamoja na hatuna nia ya kufukuza mtu yoyote kwa chama. Mtu akitaka kutoka kwa chama aondoke mwenyewe.
That's right. No expansion, no witch hunt, just an open door policy that says feel free to storm out, but don't expect a farewell cake. But the rebels were not impressed because while Oburu was serving political yoga, calm, flexible, centered, Babu Owina was serving politically heavy kickboxing, loudly and unpredictably. But Babu isn't just complaining, he is aiming higher. He now openly calling for an ODM National Delegates Convention or NDC so that the party can elect a new leader, and he's making it clear he's ready for that seat.
That what kind of a general do we need to take after Baba? Do we need the weakest general, or do we need the strongest general, or do we need a parachuted general? Our Moses is gone, and when Moses was leaving, he left at Mount Nebo, then handed over to Joshua. The next question we must ask ourselves, Jeff, is that do we need a Joshua who is Moses' age mate, or who is older than Moses, or a Joshua who is younger than Moses?
In his own words, it's time for a leadership overhaul, youth representation, fresh ideas, and less of an Olga doing extended intermission after the main star left. Babu even explained his view with biblical analogies so dramatic that even Sunday school lessons sounded like a campaign slogan.
That in the book of Joel, 2 verses 28, the Bible says clearly that old men will dream dreams, but young men will see the vision. That means that for you to dream dreams, you must be asleep. You must be at comfort zone. You must be at rest. Therefore, our old men are now at comfort zone and at rest.
Of course, everyone isn't ready for that, and behind closed doors, there have been murmurs, whispers about petitions, internal pressure, and more discussions than Bunge la Wananchi. It's all playing out like this. Oburu is the calm parent saying, we are all family here. Babu is the outspoken cousin yelling, we need a new head. And others, like Samuel, they're just out there trying to figure out who left the stove on. At this point, ODM's internal crisis isn't just leadership tension, it's practically a national competitive sport. Who gets the party seats? Who loses? Who quits? But one thing is clear. When a party built on unity starts debating loudly in public, it's less about division and more about everyone suddenly remembering, wait a minute, we have a stomach too. So grab your popcorn because this saga isn't going to end anytime soon, to quote the Utino Kajwang. In fact, it is getting hotter.
In fact, it might get hotter.
Still in our country, a 20-year-old American streamer named Ishowspeed slapped this country hard. For those of you who missed it, which means you probably live on a rock, Darren Watkins Jr., better known as Ishowspeed, is basically the human equivalent of a high-octane internet energy. He is a live streamer with tens of millions of followers who shouts, runs, and eats very questionable food on camera for fun. So when he touched down in Nairobi on January 11th for his Speed Does Africa tour stop, Kenyans went bananas. Less than an hour into his live stream, Kenyan streets were flooded, massive crowds packed places like Kenyatta Market and parts of Nairobi National Park, where we realize now you can actually fly a drone, just to see a man who, let's be clear, plays video games for a living. We are talking huge numbers too. Speed announced live that Kenyans helped him gain over 360,000 new subscribers in a single day, more than any other stop in his tour. By the end of the weekend, his streaming channel had surged past 48 million subscribers, thanks to Kenyan energy and the sheer chaos of the live stream. Now, here are a few highlights from Speed's tour. For starters, he named a baby rhino.
I'm gonna name you Ronaldo. Your name's gonna be Ronaldo. So we're gonna name the rhino Ronaldo, okay?
After Cristiano Ronaldo, so he linked up with Kenya's tallest man and called him Daddy Goliath. A trader at Kenyatta Market sold him a mango for 300 shillings. Go Kenya. And a border rider earned a tidy 10,000 shillings for following two superfans chasing down Speed around town. That's business economy. Yet, the visit wasn't without commentary. Some critics online suggested that the government was trying to use Speed as a PR stunt to launder unpopular policies like the affordable housing program. And there were debates about whether his itinerary should include authentic parts of Kenyan life or if turning places like Kibera into content would be exploitative. But it was a crowd energy that got most people talking. Because the images were hilarious and also relatable and just a little Kenyan. Middle-aged men running down Uhuru Park shouting, "Speed! Speed!" Young men sprinting to get a selfie with the guy who once got famous for streaming and screaming at video games. But, love him or not, mock him or not, here's the undeniable truth. Kenya didn't just host a streamer, we collided with the global internet culture in real time. We showed millions of viewers our markets, we showed them our wildlife, we showed them our culture, and yes, our very loud enthusiasm. And at the end of the day, maybe, just maybe, that's the real headline. That sometimes a guy who plays games online comes with no brief, no policy, no speech, and suddenly you see Kenya live, raw, loud, and unforgettable. So in 2026, if anyone ever doubts our energy, just show them Ishowspeed's Kenyan tour highlights.
Okay. Hey. Lions are big, bro.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, gather round for today's episode of Where Did the Money Go? Here comes, and it comes courtesy of Auditor General Nancy Gathungu, very brave audit report. Hey, Nancy. According to that report released just this week, 19.6 billion shillings loan that was meant to help poor Kenyans get homes has somehow turned into a financial Bermuda Triangle. Now, back in 2019, that's about 7 years ago, Kenya took a World Bank loan of about 219 million euros, which was roughly 33 billion shillings then, to make housing affordable. Part of this money, about 148 million euros, was dispersed to the Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company, or the KMRC, to lend to banks and SACCOs. Now, that's 19.6 billion shillings that we're talking about. The idea was noble: lower interest rates, longer repayment terms, and finally owning a house instead of dodging those landlords every month. Nitakulipa. Kwani imefika fifth. But here is where the modern Kenya miracle happens. Nearly 7 years later, the Auditor General says she cannot confirm how this money was spent or whether any of it is being paid back. That's right, there are no repayment records, no spending trail, and no receipts. Basically, 19.6 billion shillings walked into KMRC and became a rumor, like Sakaja's academic certificates or his dimples. Now, some quick context here. A loan like this, it normally has some conditions, including repayment that was supposed to be made in March of 2024 in 40 installments, but according to the audit, no repayment records have been shown. And guess why? Because KMRC's own financial statements are not audited by the Auditor General or delegated auditor as required by law, meaning there is no official verification of how the funds were used. It's like the money is on airplane mode. If you ask me, it's not that the money disappeared. No. It's that the paperwork chose not to follow. You see, the loan exists very clearly in principle. It's just allergic to documentation. But it gets slightly more Kenyan. Part of the loan, about 6.7 billion shillings, was cancelled in March 2024, with the government taking over responsibility for a technical assistant portion of about 725 million Kenyan shillings. So, not only can nobody explain what happened to the money, they also changed the terms halfway through, like someone renewing a gym membership, especially in January, that they never used. Now, at this point, the Auditor General is basically doing what every Kenyan parent does when they gave a child money to pay school fees and is asking for the admission letter, the fee receipt, and possibly a witness. Now, let's be clear. This isn't small change. 19.6 billion shillings is money that could buy thousands of affordable homes, or at least fix the roofs of hundreds of clinics that rusted faster than the president's promises during the campaign season. But today, instead of houses, we have questions. Instead of repayments, we have audits that go nowhere. And instead of transparency, we have something that looks like a loan that became a social experiment in invisibility. Because the loan was approved for housing, but somehow it ended up homeless. At this point, the loan has better shelter than the people it was meant for. Now, the only thing that has actually been housed successfully is the mystery of where the money went to. All right, let's roll over to international waters, where the United States of America has just announced that some are calling the biggest wait your turn moment in immigration history. Now, in a move that sounds like it was cooked up during a traffic jam, the US government announced that it will suspend immigrant visas processing for applicants from 75 countries starting January the 21st. And yes, that's the green cards, the permanent residence, family reunification type visas, etc. Now, this isn't a travel ban. You can still visit the US for tourism, for study, for business, and even work in many cases. Those B1, B2, F1, and H1B visas are untouched. Almost sounded like a rap there. But if your goal is to move there for good, well, congratulations, you've just stepped into immigration purgatory. So what is happening? Well, the US Department of State says this, that countries from Somalia to Nigeria, Iran to Brazil, Afghanistan to Thailand, it is part of a broader effort to crack down on people they think might become what Americans call a public charge. That bureaucrats speak for someone they believe might rely on government benefits once they move. And here's the twist. This isn't just speculation. The consular offices have been instructed to refuse visas that haven't been printed yet, even if the applicant already passed the interview. So, umepita, lakini hauna karatasi. That means some people who thought that they were on their way, with the paperwork and the interview done, could still get a big bureaucratic nope. And this list spans across the globe. And we're talking Africa, Asia, the Middle East, Latin America, the Caribbean, and even parts of Europe. Some of the countries on the list include Somalia, the Nigerian brothers, I'm glad they made it, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Russia, Brazil, Egypt, Uganda. Luckily, Kenya is not in it, which means Kenyans can still apply for immigrant visas. But if you're from one of the affected countries, I'm sorry, you're on pause. If this were a football match, your visa could be in extra time. Not cancelled, not denied, just held in limbo until someone upstairs figures out what public charge really means. Now, this comes on the back of already drastic deportations and visa revocations under the Trump bully administration. More than 100,000 visas were pulled back and hundreds of thousands of people either deported or self-deported in recent months. Meanwhile, the US insists that the suspension is about protecting the American taxpayer, which ironically sounds a bit like saying, you can come live here, but just make sure you bring a buddy who pays your taxes. Critics say this move won't just slow down immigration, it could dramatically reshape legal pathways for people who are around the world, affecting families, their skilled workers, and long-planned relocations. And guess what? Economists warn that this could hurt the US economy too, because immigrants actually contribute more than just paperwork to the country. But here's that part that makes this whole situation feel like a soap opera. Non-immigrant visas are fine. Tourists, students, and temporary workers are welcome. But if you plan to move there permanently, you are suspended indefinitely. It's like being invited to a party, getting the itinerary, and then being told you can't go through the front door because you might refuse to leave. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all from Hold My Mic for today. But remember, we are watching. The world doesn't pause, and neither do we. I'm Willis Raburu. See you here next time in this crazy Kenya we live in. Hold my mic.
Hold my mic. Hold my mic. Hold my mic. Yeah.